What's going on, guys? It's NYPrepper here. I wanted to do part 2 of SHTF while you're traveling or on vacation, and what to do if society collapses while you're away from home, you're on a vacation, you're traveling. And this is part 2, and I'm going to talk about how to actually respond to SHTF while you're traveling or away from home. In the first part, if you didn't see the first part, I recommend you check that out. I just talk about different gear items that I think you should have when you're traveling and when you're away from home. Okay, I went over basic gear items like bug out bags, firearms, water storage, things like that. Okay, so in this part I'm going to go more into the tactics and strategies of surviving a collapse of society when you're traveling and you're away from home, you're away from your preps, you're out on the road, you're hundreds of miles away from all your supplies, you're in an unfamiliar area, you don't know the area. Okay, so what do you do in that situation? Well, first of all, you should have, if you already planned properly, you plan the trip properly, you would be in a very good position, because you would try to plan your route through the least populated areas and away from big cities and heavy population centers, and trying to plan your route away from big cities and big population clusters is generally favorable, okay? Because if you're on the road and, let's say there's an EMP or there's World War III or something like that, or whatever you're doing wherever you are, if you're close to a dense population center with a lot of people, then the odds of running into problems go up dramatically, okay? Because you have to fight with millions of other people for the same resources, and if something happens, everybody's going to try to escape the city just like you are, and there's going to be traffic jams. There's going to be a lot of unprepared people that are going to try to maybe take your supplies, or who knows what they're going to try to do in that situation. Okay, so you want to try to avoid population centers that are very densely packed, densely populated. But obviously, depending on what you're doing, depending on the nature of your traveling or the nature of your vacation, you can't always avoid population centers. If your vacation involves you going to, let's say New York City on a vacation in New York City or something, then you obviously are not going to want to avoid New York City, because that's the purpose of your trip. But if you're not going to a big city, you should try to plan your routes in such a way that you avoid heavy population centers. And I always like to take roads that are more like local roads, or county roads and things like that. I try to avoid interstates, because interstates generally tend to be have problems when there's a disaster. The interstates always get crowded, and it's not easy to get off of an interstate once you get onto it. So that's the downside with interstates. But so planning is very important, but aside from planning, your response is going to be essential. Let's say you planned your trip properly. Let's say you have all the gear that you can take with you, reasonable. You're not going to load up your car with thousands of rounds of ammo if you're going on a vacation. I mean, you can if you want to, but your wife may think you're a little bit nuts or something. But let's say your gear, you got all the gear you need, you planned everything out, and SHTF still happens. What do you do? What do you do? Do you try to go back home, or do you stick it out and see what happens? So that's what I want to talk about in this video and get more into that. So the first thing that I think you should do if that were to happen is you need to do a threat assessment, and you need to gather intelligence on what's going on, and you have to determine what the threat is. Is it a national threat? Is it a regional threat? Or is it a localized threat? So if we're talking about like a national threat, we're talking about an EMP, and World War III, something like that, martial law, okay, that would be a national or nationwide threat, okay? Regional threats would be like a hurricane or maybe a bad snowstorm that's affecting multiple states and shutting everything down. And a localized threat could be something as simple as a train derailing and spilling toxic chemicals or something like that. Okay, that could be a localized threat. So you need to determine, is the SHTF, is it nationwide, is it regional, and is it local? So depending on what you're dealing with, then you could respond accordingly. And if we're talking about nationwide SHTF like an EMP or World War III, then you're gonna want to try to get back to where your preps are, depending on how far away you are and what where you are. You want to try to get back to where your preps are. All right, because that's where you're going to be safest. That's where your supplies are. That's where you know the area. Your family's there. Your friends are there. Okay, you don't want to be in an unfamiliar location with people that you don't know, you don't trust. But by the time you get back to your home or get back to your bug out location, it may already be ransacked by the time you get back there. Like if you're traveling across country like I am right now, and you're, let's say, a couple hundred miles away or 1,000 or 2,000 miles away, by the time you get back, even if it was the highways were not blocked and you could theoretically continue just driving across the interstates, and you may be able to get back to your house in 2 days or 1 day or 3 days. Depending on the situation, your house may already be ransacked and all your supplies may be gone already. So that's a risk that you run. If you're trying to get back to your preps, you may get back there and there may not be anything left. The only thing that would be left is hopefully your family and your friends and people that you trust, and home field advantage, which I think is very underestimated by a lot of preppers, is having that home field advantage. Your home is, the area, the terrain, and that's where you're going to be safest because the area, okay? And where the resources are, where there's defensible positions, where there's avenues of approach, your neighbors, okay? The seasons, the weather. If you're in an unfamiliar area, you don't know anything. You don't know anybody, you don't know the seasons, you don't know the terrain. You don't have a detailed knowledge of the area, and so you don't have that advantage. So, but obviously you have to, so the first thing you do is you do your threat assessment, determine what you're dealing with. Is it an EMP, is it a hurricane, or is it something localized? And then from there, you got to create a plan on what you're going to do. Are you going to try to get back home, or are you going to try to stick it out and survive where you are? My suggestion is to leapfrog back to your home, okay, and get back to your preps. But, in order to do that, you're going to have to be very careful, number one. Before you even create a plan about how to get back to your preps, you have to think about your immediate safety and your family's immediate safety. So, your preps and your home, that's secondary. Your primary responsibility is to take care of your family and yourself. So you need to deal with whatever impending threats may be coming. So if, let's say, there's an EMP and you're hundreds of miles away from your house, you have to anticipate the fact that people are going to start to go nuts pretty quickly once they realize that there's an EMP and there's no power anywhere. People are going to panic. So you need to get to a safe area, okay? You need to get yourself to a safe location, and you need to get your family to a safe location as soon as possible, all right? The location has to be defensible, all right? It has to be a defensible location, and you have to be able to defend that area. It has to be a safe location. You want to look for an area that's going to protect you from small arms. It's going to protect you from radiation, all right? I'm going to do a separate video on that, how to select different buildings and stuff like that. but you want to look for a safe location where you can go, and that's where planning ahead of time is critical, because, and having a paper map is critical too. The paper map will really help you out in that situation, because you can look at the map and you'll be able to see where there's potential danger zones and safe zones. You may be able to find a national forest that you can go to and spend a couple days and figure out your next steps. Or if you're already at a hotel may be a pretty safe location. But your best bet is going to be to try to leapfrog, back home. And that's not going to be easy, because the interstates are going to be crowded. People are going to be panicking. It's going to be dangerous out there. So trying to travel back after SHTF to your home is going to be very dangerous. So at that point, you're going to have to make the determination, is the risk worth it? Depending on how bad the situation is. If it's not that bad yet, you may be able to try to get back. But if it's already getting pretty bad out there and it's not safe to go out, like if, let's say, it's a nuclear attack, you're not going to want to be driving in nuclear fallout, okay? You're going to want to take shelter and shelter yourself from the fallout, okay? And wait for the fallout to subside. But we're talking about like an EMP or something along those lines, or World War III, you may be able to still travel on the roads, so you have to make that determination. Did society break down enough where it's too dangerous for you to try to get back home, and you're better off just improvising a new location and figuring out another way to get in contact with your family members back at home. But if you're going to try to go back home, you're going to have to leapfrog. You're not going to be able to cover as much ground in one day as you would if it's rule of law, because you're going to have to avoid interstates. You're going to have to go on back roads. A lot of gas stations may be out of business. Gas stations may run out of gas at some point, and there may be a lot of people at those gas stations panicking, so that could be a danger area. So it's not going to be that easy to get back, but you're going to have to, if you're going to try to get back, you're going to have to leapfrog and do like little jumps, a couple 100-mile jumps every day, try to cover a couple 100 miles by car, and you're going to have to plan your routes out meticulously, and you're going to have to, really take security into consideration with everything you do. Once society collapses, if you're going to try to cover that much distance to get back, if you're, let's say, 1,000 miles away from home or 500 miles away, you're going to have to leapfrog back, and you're going to want to definitely take back roads. You're not going to want to go on interstates, because interstates are going to be packed with people panicking and stuff like that. So you're going to want to take back roads and local roads. But you could also get into trouble on local roads too, because you may have local guys that set up roadblocks, and they're going to try to, catch people that are trying to flee or pass through different areas, and they're going to try to shake you down and take your stuff, or even as bad as maybe even raping you, if you're a woman. So these are things you also have to consider. Just because you're on a back road doesn't mean you're safe. Back roads are easy to set up ambush points on, and so these are all things you got to consider, guys. You got to do a threat assessment. You have to think about your immediate safety, depending on what the situation is. Once you get to that immediate safe area and you've taken care of the immediate needs of your family, like food, water, shelter, okay, and security, once you've taken care of those needs, then you can think about planning a way to get back home. All right, but your number one priority before thinking about how to get back is making sure you and your family are safe, okay? Safe. You guys have food, you have water, you have shelter from the elements, and you're in a good, secure, defensible area where you're away from dangerous people and you can defend the area. That's your first priority before you do anything else, okay? Then once you have that once you have that figured out, then you can think about planning and planning how you're going to get back, and maybe leapfrogging, like I said, leapfrogging from one area to the next and planning out your route to get back home and get back to your hometown and your preps and everything else, you know. So that's pretty much it. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, nothing crazy. That's all you can really do, you know. That's, you know, that nobody's ever really explored this type of situation for, you know, as being a prepper. A lot of guys don't think about, you know, what happens if you're out of town when SHTF happens. So I thought I would talk about it a little bit, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And if you like the video, hit the thumbs up button, and as always, take care, God bless, and don't forget the 3 P's: prepare, practice, and persevere.